Sí. Lo viste muy bien.
Para no perder este tan lindo acento que tengo. Vuelvo todo el año a Chile para no perder este tan lindo acento que tengo. ¿Cierto? Oh. Yo caché que la última vez que había venido acá, este edificio no existía. Unos 4 o 5 años, ¿no? Ah, más que eso.
¿Cuándo llegaste tú?
En el 15 tú llegaste.
Está empezando la construcción.
Ah, sí.
Acá empezaron a construir 16 a fin de año, creo que principio del 2017.
¿Cuánto se cambiaron? Solo claro, 15 ya estaba abierto. ¿Qué pasó?
Eso es lo que le decía el Diego delante cuando llegamos al alto, pues ya no parece western llegar a las torres cuando uno llega ahí a la cuestita. Pues, ya no, está. Vamos, Diego.
Gracias a todos por venir. Gracias a Juan por y lo siento, primera café, no sé qué ha pasado.
Hola a todos, muchas gracias por venir. En inglés, ¿cierto?
Yeah, English.
English? All right. So, I'll present you one of my work of the last years that I've been working on, which is about decomposition methods, very generic ones, and all the application that we could make use of with this. So, I will first introduce a little bit like what is the main idea of it, and present column generation as an introductive case, and then see what is the extension that we could make of column generation, the classical case in LP. After that, I will show a little bit the relationship that there is between column generation and pandas decomposition, and then derivate a generic constraint decomposition scheme with different ways of generating constraints. And then a couple of special cases and some further work. So, column generation, it is very well known for its effectiveness and for its broad area of application, which is to solve large-scale problems or nice problems that are typically hardened by something. So you have some structure, but for some reason, you have side constraints or an objective that is nonlinear, and it breaks the nice structure that you have, and you cannot use tailored algorithm anymore. And it is too big also to solve it by just a solver. Okay? So resource constraint shortest path, for example, that's a good example. You have a shortest path problem, but that is solvable in polynomial time. But if you add side constraints, you cannot make use of those tailored algorithms to solve them, right? So side constraints or a nonlinear objective, whatever, you name it, right? And on the other hand, if you add those constraints or if you add that bad objective, then you cannot also, you're not able to solve it with a solver because it's too big. It's like an integer problem with sides or nonlinearities. It's very hard to solve. So what can you do? Well, try to take advantage of the substructure that is nice, but that is broken for the with the side constraints or the nonlinear objective, and solve smaller problems that are still with a bad structure, but that are small. Okay, so on one hand, a nice problem, very big, and on the other hand, a very complicated problem, but small. Okay? Okay, so fret not. Those are the two main problems we will tackle in this presentation. This is the most generic one. Okay, column generation in general, you tackle problems that are LPs in general, right? LPs that are being hardened. So you have a very structured set X, very generic one, but that has a nice structure. Can be huge, but it's very nice. And your objective, usually it's linear, and you have side constraints over there. So here, it's like the most generic one. You want some function to belong to a cone. Okay? So in LP, what is the cone? It's the positive orthant. Okay? But it can be for semi-definite optimization, can be second-order cones, can be a lot of things. Okay? And this is not necessarily linear. Okay? So it expands the scope of column generation when considering this kind of problem. And here, you have another problem which has kind of the same structure a Bender's decomposition is useful for. Okay? Which is, you try to maximize some objective function. In Bender's decomposition, you have an objective that is linear. Here, you can have anything, right? The lambda set is not necessarily structured, can be integer or anything. And you have some side constraints over there that are very high dimensional, but have some structure. Okay? So what is the nice properties? What are the nice properties of each one of those problems? Well, the first one, P, is when you omit the conic constraints, the side ones, then the problem is easy. Okay? Such as in column generation for the shortest path, for example, you relax those side constraints, and well, with some assumptions, it's a shortest path problem. Okay? So in this case, could be more or less the same thing, but in a way harder setting, nonlinear, you name it. In the other one, the good thing is when you fix the first stage variable, the lambdas, then it decomposes in a bunch of other problems that are easily solvable also. Okay? Like in Bender's decomposition. In Bender's decomposition, you fix the first stage variables, and the second stage is easy. And you usually have strong Lagrangian duality. Okay? Good until now? All right. So, the easier case, the known one. Dantzig Wolfe. Everything is linear, all your objectives, your side constraint, they are linear, and the cone that we're considering is just the positive orthant. Okay? So you have this problem. It is large, and if you take out the side constraints, it is an easy problem. Okay? So we define two problems in column generation. You have one that relaxes those sides and put them into a penalized objective. And this one, by hypothesis, is easy. Okay? This is the pricing problem in column generation. You can show that the pricing problem, the one that looks for the variable, the column that is the best one that you want to make enter, that is the optimal solution of the Lagrangian relaxation given some penalization that you fixed. Okay? So it is large, but it's easy. We have an algorithm to solve it, and it's not a big deal. So it takes some penalization and gives you some optimal vector. All right? On the other hand, you have the master problem. So the one that keeps a complicated structure, but is small in scale. Right? So this one, instead of taking a feasibility set that is like capital X, it takes a subset S, which in case of Dantzig Wolfe, it's just the convex hull, the Minkowski sum of the convex hull of the vertices that we found earlier, plus the conic hull of all the rays that we found with the generator problem. Okay? So this one is complicated, but it's small. You just add columns as you need them. All right? And of course, it's a minimization problem, so it gives you an upper bound for your optimal value. Right? So why am I putting this subset over there? because for column generation, that's a very specific subset of your feasibility set. But you can do things that are different. And that's the main topic of this talk. Okay, so what is the feedback? Well, I start with some columns. I solve my restricted problem, which gives some multipliers for the side constraints, which fits them to the Lagrangian relaxation, which is the pricing problem. The pricing problems gives me a column that I make use in the restricted problem. I add it to my subset. I expand it so that my approximation of the original set is better. Okay? So we can formalize the update mechanism in a little broader way, which is you update that subset, so you expand it in a way that it contains the new column that you just generated. All right? Just in this generic way. Okay? So Lagrangian relaxation gives a lower bound. The restricted problem gives an upper bound, and the gap goes closing. So you stop whenever the gap is small, or if the column you just generated is inside the subset you had. That's an alternate criterion for column generation also. If the column you just generated already belongs to that convex hull, then you're done. Okay? You don't even need to calculate the bounds or anything. You know that you're done. Okay? All right. So now how do we generalize that with the other problems that we defined earlier? Well, let's go back to the very generic nonlinear conic problem. The assumption that we made was it was large but easy without the sides. Okay? So the only assumption that we're making, which is a pretty strong one, but it's the only one, is that you have zero Lagrangian duality gap, meaning that there exists some penalization for those side constraints, such that when you penalize them in the objective, there exists some penalization giving you an optimal value for the Lagrangian relaxation that is exactly equal to the optimal value of your original complete problem. Okay? So that's a strong assumption, but that's the only one. Okay. Well, the cone dual, I won't enter in details, but the penalization has to be in the cone that is dual to C. Let's keep that for questions if you want. Yes?
But you are assuming that the G is convex. You're assuming that G is convex?
No, not necessarily. You can have non-convex problem that have zero non-Lagrangian duality gap. But yeah, it helps, of course. So, but that's...
You're assuming that it's okay.
Yes. So it's just, if it's convex, everything, you have a constraint qualification, you're good. But it's a special case. So yeah, I'm just assuming that I have zero Lagrangian duality gap. Okay? All right. All right. So we have the same feedback. Okay? Same feedback in the sense that we have a restricted problem, and we, instead of taking that capital X in feasibility set, we take a way smaller one in dimension. We solve it, and it provides exactly the same loop. And we can show that we have, again, convergence to an optimal solution whenever the column we just generated with the pricing problem, the Lagrangian relaxation, belongs already to the subset that we defined in the master. Okay? So what I didn't say is that it is a generic algorithm for any subset. I'm not talking about convex hulls anymore. It can be anything. As long as you update your subset such that it contains the newly added column, then you're done. The scheme is correct. And when it stops, it provides you an optimal solution for your original problem. Okay? So it can be anything, literally anything. All right. So that's a proof of concept of why it works. So you have the optimal solution here, omega star P. That's the optimal solution, the optimal value of your ordinal problem. The objective value of the restricted problem is over there, omega of S. That's a restriction, so it gives an upper bound for your problem. The Lagrangian relaxation is a lower bound, okay? And here you have another problem, that is the restriction of the Lagrangian relaxation, okay? So I change capital X for my subset. So think again in Dantzig Wolfe, that's like the convex hull of my columns, all right? And I relax also the side constraints with a penalization lambda, okay? That's the optimal value, that is the value of the problem that is on the bottom, okay? And here, so on the relationship, the blue relationship at the right, that's true because by definition of the penalization lambda, that's the optimal one that we just found, okay? So we have equality actually between those two bounds, like the eastern one and the southern one, okay? Always. And on the bottom and to the west, why do we have that relationship? Well, because if my stopping criterion is met, which is my column that I just generated belongs to my subset, then it is also an optimal solution for the Lagrangian relaxation. For the other one, for the one that is restricted, the one at south. So in the end, what do we have? Well, we can do a full circle over there. So all the bounds are actually equal. So what does that mean? Well, that the restricted problem has an optimal solution that is optimal for the original one. And we can stop. Okay? Good with this? Okay. So one issue of this is that the pricing problem can be as hard as the original one, right? We have a nonlinear problem that is conic also, can be conic, can be nonlinear. So can be a hard problem just to generate columns, and can be as hard as the original problem. So what do we do? Well, could be nice to linearize the objective, for example. Okay? Shortest path again, if you want to release and relax some side constraints that are nonlinear in the objective, it might be a nonlinear objective again, and the shortest path with nonlinear objective, that's hard. So if you could linearize that, could be really easier, no? So there is another scheme that linearizes the pricing problem, and you have the same convergence properties. Okay? You can show that if the scheme, the same loop, the same feedback loop, that works. Okay? Just linearizing the pricing. Okay? Well, that's nice. Okay? Same feedback, but solving on the right, instead of having the Lagrangian relaxation, you linearize the objective at the current incubant of the master, and it works also. All right? Well, I will skip that. And okay. So another issue that there is that for the Lagrangian relaxation, you still have auxiliary variables, right? Remember that we had x's and y's. The x's were the main variables that were very structured, and the y's were just, I don't know, for example, for shortest path could be fuel consumption, okay, calculated from the x's. So over there, this problem still depends on the other ones. That doesn't happen in linear programming. You have like duality arguments that allow you to just eliminate them. In this case, sometimes you can eliminate them and turn the sub-problem, your Lagrangian relaxation, into a problem that depends only on your main variables. Okay? So, well, that's one. I won't take time playing in it, but if in the Lagrangian relaxation you can optimize in y independently of the x you're fixing, then you're done. And the current incubant of the auxiliary variables, they are already optimal for that. So you don't have to optimize in y. And in the linearized scheme, then it's always true. Okay, the linearized scheme where your pricing problem has an objective that is linearized, then it's always true. Your current increment in y, it's already optimal for the sub-problem, and you have just to generate your column on the structured subset. Okay? So far, so good? Yeah? Okay. So, okay. Now, there is a direct interpretation of column generation in Bender's decomposition. What happens? What is the interpretation of adding columns in a primal problem, in a linear programming context, when you add columns in the primal, what happens to the dual? Well, there is a very well-known relationship of that you add cuts on your dual problem. So here you go. We have DLP from before and its dual problem. Okay. So the capital lambda is the non-structured subset that we will use hereafter. And the subproblem that we solve for Bender's decomposition, it's actually just the dual of the Lagrangian relaxation. And what is exactly the interpretation? You fixed the lambdas. So the dual problem of the Lagrangian relaxation, the pricing problem, it's actually the original problem when you fix the first stage, which are the lambdas. Okay? So the counterpart of the master problem, you add columns in the primal. That means that you are adding rows in the other one. So why am I putting the subset SK over there? Well, it doesn't appear in the formulation, right? You just have cuts, but SK doesn't appear anywhere. The thing is, if you look at the end of this slide, you have something over there that is obtained by Lagrangian duality again. Remember that I said that, I don't know if I said it actually. When you fix the first stage variable, you have zero Lagrangian duality gap for the subproblems, right? In linear programming, that's always true. That's the subproblem, it's an LP, so you have strong duality, Lagrangian one. So what does that mean? Well, you have some penalization, some X in reality, such that if you relax those constraints, you get the same objective value, right? So instead of taking a penalization that is just positive here, you restrict it exactly as in column generation to some subset that you fix by yourself, that is user-defined. Okay, so in column generation, your S, your subset S, it was the convex hull. In this case, for Benders, you use the convex hull again, and you obtain what? Well, all those cuts that are in the formulation that is on the center of this slide. Okay? So S doesn't appear on the formulation at the top, but it's implicitly there. It's explicitly stated at the bottom. Okay? So it's like a max min max, if you want. Okay? All right. So we have the same feedback again. For Bender's decomposition, you solve your master problem with a few cuts, which means I have a few columns generated in the primal. It provides a first stage. You solve the second stage problem, and then the feedback, it's the same. You update your subset such that it contains the newly generated column. Good? Exactly the same feedback. Okay, but here we're interested in the dual variables, right? So it's like first stage and second stage variable that I return, not the XY of my primal problem. Okay? So, as in the primal setting, you can generalize that. So let's go back to the generic problem that I showed you at the very beginning of this presentation. You have a maximization problem in terms of lambdas and pi. The lambdas are first stage, the pi's are second stage. Capital lambda is anything. It's very generic. You can get the integer, a non-convex, you name it, anything. And the other one, on the bottom, those are the constraints that are nice, to say so. So when you fix them, when you fix the first stage, you obtain that the problem is made such that it decomposes in a lot of subproblems that are easy to solve. And you have zero Lagrangian duality gap for this second stage problem. So what does it mean? So let's take a look at the last problem at the bottom. You maximize in the first stage, and then after that, you have an objective function that depends only on the second stage, right? It's only a function of the first stage, right? And we assumed that we had zero Lagrangian duality gap for this subproblem. So what does it mean? Well, the minimum of all the penalization x of that relaxed problem over there, relaxed second stage, can be a little confusing, but it's necessary. I'm sorry. This is exactly equal to the objective value of the first stage, right? You can just express that in first stage terms, right? So what will we do? We will restrict, instead of making it like in that cone dual kappa star, we will restrict it to a subset that is nicer, that gives us a master problem that is nicer than originally and smaller. Okay? All right. So what I just said, instead of taking the cone dual to kappa, right, you restrict it to something. So in terms of benders, again, you take the convex hull of your vertices plus the cone hull of all the rays that you took. So that's complicated, right? It's ugly. Nobody wants to solve something like this. But it can be small under some assumptions. Depending on which set SK you choose, you can make appear really nice structures. So what is the problem here? You have a max, min, max. That's ugly. Nobody knows how to solve this, right? You don't have a closed form, not for any S's, right? So, well, you could do something, no? The problem in minimizing in X over there, it's linear in X, no? You could swap it. Actually, if you have zero Lagrangian duality gap, your min-max in X and in P, you can swap them. If you have zero Lagrangian duality gap, that's an implication. You can swap those. So what happens? You have a minimum in X of a linear function in X, right? So if, just if, those subsets that you chose were conic and some constraint qualification would hold, you could use strong duality in conic programming to come back to a max problem, a full max one. So that's what happens. Oh, that's what happens, but afterwards I will give it to you. I had forgotten that it wasn't exactly in this order. Okay, so you can, it sounds ugly like this, but we will see later on that you can have closed form for that. Okay, so the feedback, exactly the same as a Bender's decomposition. You extract the same information of each problem, and you return exactly the same thing whenever the column you just generated in your dual belongs already to the subset you're using. Good? Okay. So, a little thing is that your master problem can be really hard. So you could linearize it again. It keeps the complicated structure. But if you want, and there are some hypotheses that are a little restrictive, but well, it's not from another world, you can solve a master problem that is linearized. The objective and all the constraints, you can linearize that. And you keep the same convergence, the same stopping criterion. Again, if the column you generated belongs to the subset you're using already, you're done. Okay? Okay, same feedback. So, as I told you earlier, you have special cases that can allow you to make the max, min, max into a full max problem and have an explicit formulation of it. That's what is interesting, right? If you don't know how to solve that, there is absolutely no interest in reformulating those problems. Okay? So, if, as I said earlier, if your subset is conic linear defined with all those relations over there, then you can reformulate the master problem, restricting the dual variables x to a subset defined such as this. You get a full reformulation in a max problem, and it's explicit. Okay? And lucky us, most of the schemes that just come to mind, they are like that. Okay? So it might as well be tractable. At least you can formulate that and give it to a solver, even a global optimization solver if your problem is ugly and doesn't have any properties in particular. Right? Okay, so illustration. you have a bounded polyhedron. Okay? The green dot is the optimal solution. Okay? The green dot is the optimal solution of this. So Dantzig, Wolfe, and Beddoes decomposition, in their respective worlds and spaces, what do is, well, I have the convex hull of 2 points at the very beginning, and then I add the column that I just generated, and I expand the subset that I'm using, right? So if I'm lucky, I have one optimal solution inside of that newly generated subset S, and that's good, or I iterate until I contain one, or I'm close enough, okay? Another one is another algorithm known as the Beanstalk-Zuckerberg one. Actually, it's not exactly Beanstalk-Zuckerberg here, but instead of generating the convex hull, you generate the linear space generated by the column you're using. Okay, so instead of saying I'm using the convex hull of those columns, I say I am using the linear space generated by those columns intersected with my polyhedron X. Okay, so in the left figure, in red here, that's the one that is defined by this point, okay? The origin is on the bottom left. So the linear space is just like that line, directed by the column that I generated earlier, and intersected with the feasibility set, right? So I just have that segment that is a load in my master problem, sorry, okay? And second iteration, I get another one. I get another column that I generated, which is the lowest leftist vertex that is on that polyhedron, the red point. And then I intersect everything. But what happens here? I'm generating a linear space. I'm in 2 dimensions here, and I'm generating a sublinear space of dimension 2. So what happens? I come back on the original formulation, on the original subset, right? So here, that gives like an intuition about why this algorithm converges in at most the dimension of your structured subset. Okay? All right? So to generate cuts, it's the exact same thing. It will converge in a number of iterations that is at most the dimension. Okay? So what is the interpretation of that in the dual? Because that was the interpretation for the primal variable decomposition. In this case, so in the dual scheme, you want to do something with the constraints that are too many, you know? Like in the Beddoes decomposition scheme, well, you would try to do something, but with the other scheme, with like the S, that is the linear space intersected with your original feasibility problem. So what happens in this case? Well, instead of generating cuts that correspond to vertices and rays of your dual polyhedron, in this case, it aggregates constraints. And at each iteration, you disaggregate things. You add an aggregated cut, if you want. What happens? So with the formula that I gave you, taking like the dual, the conic dual of the problem, we had an explicit form, remember? So in this case, with the Beanstalk-Zuckerberg, you just try to generate all the x's that are linear combination of the columns you generated. So it's just q times theta. The theta, it's a vector of ponderations. Each theta is how much do I go in direction, well, the column of q that corresponds. Okay? So what happens in the problem? Well, the master problem that I have, it's the same as the original one, but I am restricting my muse, if you want, to an orthogonal space to the column, depending on the columns I already generated. In an LP context, that would be saying, look, I take an aggregation of all my constraints, because remember that all those dual vectors x's, those guys, they are the dimension of the number of constraints that you have already generated. Yeah? So if you take one column that you generate, and you make a linear combination of all the constraints, you do a scalar product of it, right? You generate another constraint that is like an aggregate one of all those guys. Well, that's what happens with the Beanstalk-Zuckerberg algorithm for the dual problem. you add an aggregate cut each time that you add something. And the convergence is guaranteed by the result. It's generated for any subset over there. Okay? So you just add cuts that are just aggregates of the original ones. Okay? All right. So the last one is pretty nice, but it was surprising. Imagine that you have, instead of having the convex hull, like Dantzig, Wolfe, and Benders, or having the linear hull intersected with your original space for Beanstalk, you take a ball intersected with the original space. We'll see it for the dual. Okay? What happens? You restrict your variables x's to be in the ball of radius rho and centered at x hat. Okay? Very simple thing. Well, the master problem you get, and that's very surprising, it's an augmented Lagrangian relaxation of your problem. So you don't have new constraints. You just take out all the constraints you had, like the not complicating one, but the one that were a lot, you remember? And you relapse them in your objective. And you have a classical Lagrangian relaxation here with the center of your ball, plus, well, minus an augmentation of the radius of your ball here. So that's very surprising, because it can give an intuition also, well, why in integer programming you could have strong duality sometimes if the radius of your ball is large enough. Okay? If the radius of the dual variables of that ball, if it's large, if it's infinity, well, in the limit, that's an indicator function, right? Your constraints are not satisfied. Well, I'm going infinity. My constraints are satisfied. Well, that goes 0. Okay? So even for non-convex problems, sometimes that would work. Okay, so I'm just giving you the example with the ball, but it would work better, the ball plus like the sum of a ball plus a cone, right? To have like some unboundedness at some point. And you have something uglier than that, but you have just one conic constraint that is added to this. You have an augmentation plus one single conic constraint. And you replace that. So it is, in some cases, it would be super interesting to see for which problems that exists. There actually exists some center and some radius that are finite, such that this is exactly a reformulation of your original problem. It gives you exactly the same optimal solutions. Okay? So, yeah, you have another one. You could do it with Fenchel transforms too, with non-ball things, but with a function that is lower than something. You can do it also. You have closed formals with Fenchel transforms. Okay? All right. So, well, you could actualize that with the ball. You get, you have to update the ball at each iteration, right? So that would give you several ways to do an augmented Lagrangian algorithm. It gives you other ways to update your penalization at each iteration, right? That's the interpretation in your master problem. Can see it? No? I don't know. So here, for example, you have your current column that you generated and some radius. So yeah.
The code that you're adding is just for the algorithm, or it's in the formulation of your initial program?
So you have a ball in your
original problem, or you add this as a constraint?
No. It's the relaxation is over there. It appears in the master problem only in the objective. That's the weird thing. Well, the surprising one. You don't have any constraints of the original one, just like the lambda.
The S up there is a ball, right?
Right.
The ball intersected with K star.
This
ball, do you control it, or is a fixed constraint?
You can control it to some extent, yes. As long as the newly generated column belongs to that new ball, then you're good, and the algorithm is still correct.
You're not allowed to change the ball.
I am. My only concern is to make sure that the new ball contains the new column. So here, for example, in this example, it was centered somewhere and it had some radius, okay? And the new column that generate, it's on the right picture and with the leftmost vertex over there, that contains the new column, right? The southern dot. So that's it. It satisfies the hypothesis of the algorithm, and that's it. But that, I could have done it like this, in another way, right? Not centered at the original at the previous center, and just increased the radius so that it would contain the new column. I could have done that, taking the smallest ball containing the last center and the new column. That would satisfy my hypothesis.
What happened to your original constraint? The original constraint was the small ball there. You're changing your constraint.
I'm changing the penalization, changing the center and the radius. That's the only update that I'm doing at each iteration of the algorithm.
It's not a constraint.
No.
It's a trick for the algorithm.
It is like the form that some subset that I am using for my dual variables, well, the master problem takes that form instead of adding cuts. It just changes the penalization that I'm using in the augmentation, if you want. You're expanding the ball each time.
My job is
The master is the combination of complex components.
Yeah.
It's the linear.
Yes.
And here it's a ball that contains.
Exactly. So it doesn't increase in dimension if you want, but it increases in like volume-wise.
What is the problem? What is the optimization problem you're trying to solve?
The original one?
Yeah.
Or the master one?
The original one.
So the original one is this, but you have those constraints here that are, okay, all right, so that we have both things under the eye. So. And you have right? That's the original one. What can you do?
No, that's good.
Yeah? Okay, just one step so that everybody follows. So you can replace this by adding an additional variable mu and say that mu must be in the cone and gamma of lambda pi in like this, right? That's equivalent. So what is this? It's just forgetting this and putting it over there. Okay? So it reformulates in a very strange way problems. And depending on what you're using as a subset, you could do like really fancy things, I think. And it gives you other ways to update your penalization for augmented Lagrangian algorithms. As long as you get that just condition of how you update it, that the newly generated column has to be inside of the new restricted set, you're done. So it's up to you to just update those. And if you want to make sure that the bound keep going better, you have to make sure that, for example, your ball strictly expands. Oh, well, contains the other one.
But here, do you have convergence results?
No. 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 No, yeah, I don't know that. I don't know at what rate it goes. I have no idea. Just that it was surprising to find this. I wasn't expecting this kind of thing. So, okay, so this, and well, another thing that I would like to do, well, okay, I will skip all of this. In my future work, I would like to do very much a lot of things. So those algorithms, they take as a very strong assumption that you have strong Lagrangian duality. That's not the case in integer programming. And actually, Dantzig Wolfe has unique properties that allows it to do some things with the convex hull of your integer points and everything. I think it's the only one that allows you to do things with nice bounds and follow exactly the same scheme as before. Okay? But nevertheless, you can now do that, but before, there are some priors of that, but you can solve SDP relaxations of extended formulations for that. Stronger reformulations of integral problem. For example, you could do column generation for that. And of course, you could use different health and structured subsets for your subset that you're using in your master problem. Another thing that I would like very much to see what happens would have caught your eye that the title of my presentation was Lagrangian decomposition methods. Why that? Because the pricing problem is a Lagrangian relaxation. Well, you could do something else. You could use surrogate relaxation to generate columns, for example. Instead of relaxing all your constraints in the objective, you could aggregate all of them with some ponderation. That would provide stronger relaxation and avoid some of the bang-bang effects of column generation. Would stabilize it a lot. Okay? And it actually links pretty well to a work from Conforti and Wolfe from last year, that they do things very similar with a Bender's decomposition, how to stabilize it. Okay? And, well, use maybe exotic sets with functions instead of like conic balls to see what happens in the convergence and everything. So that's pretty much it. Good? Do you have any questions? No?
¿Qué tipo de problema funcionaría bien ese tipo de relajación? ¿Me cuesta visualizar? ¿Qué problema hay en mente para ese tipo de realización?
Versiones robustas. Versiones robustas, por ejemplo, de problemas normales. Tú tenés, no sé, una versión cónica, un set robusto, el set de incertidumbre que tenés. ¿Sí? Entonces tenés algo así. En realidad, yo al principio lo hacía con solamente no linealidades o solamente conos. Pero al final me di cuenta que funcionaba con los dos y incluso cuando uno junta los dos juntos, está funcionando bien. Ser riguroso con la anotación, pero funciona todo bien. Entonces, ahora no se me viene a la mente ninguna aplicación directa con todas esas no linealidades, todas esas cosas cónicas y todo, no se me ocurre nada, pero de que a alguien se le ocurre, funciona.
Lo otro que tú lo llamaste Lagrangiano aumentado, eso
¿Mm?
el típico Lagrangiano aumentado con una norma al cuadrado.
Sí.
¿De dónde sale? ¿Podrías meterlo dentro de un esquema?
Sí.
¿Un Lagrangiano aumentado?
Sí.
¿Cuál sería la penalización o la restricción?
Ahí tiene la norma dual acá. ¿Ya? Ahí está. Si tomaron
Cuadrado.
No, creo que no. De hecho, hay un paper de
El Lagrangiano aumentado Rockefeller es un cuadrático ahí para que esa cosa
hay problemas.
se anule, no, para que esa parte desaparezca cuando convergiste suave.
Sí, con un cuadrado hay problemas. De hecho, en este paper uno de los dos que están abajo, ¿ya? Muestran cosas de Lagrangiano aumentado, muestran resultados de dualidad fuerte para problemas IP, para algunos, y muestran que justamente cuando la augmentación es una norma, funciona, pero una norma al cuadrado dan un contraejemplo para mostrar que en el límite no va a converger, pero que nunca logra tener un gap cero con una penalización finita. Eso. Muestran un contraejemplo. Sí. Ya, lo que pasa es que, mira, ya, no quise ponerlo acá porque ya es lo suficientemente feíto, así, pero cuando en vez de tomar una bola acá, tomáis una bola y más un cono, asociado a otra norma, ¿ya? O la misma, da lo mismo. En realidad, entonces, tenéis la bola acá, arriba, en la augmentación, pero aparte hay una restricción cónica, que linkea al cono que tú defines en el S, ¿ya? Y sí, con un finito, ahí sí que estoy convencido que con uno finito puede converger a algo. Tú puedes encontrar porque en realidad cualquier set, no sé, algo que tiene una parte unbounded, ¿ya? Orientáis el cono por allá, te ponéis la bola por acá, donde están todas las cosas finitas del set de factibilidad inicial, y está ahí. No necesitas tener un rayo gigante. O sea, bueno, puede ser gigante, pero al menos finito. Entonces estoy convencido que ahí, para el cono, si lo orientáis bien y que el cierre está bueno, está perfecto. Pero te daría algo más complicado. Es como los cortes de factibilidad, en realidad, de inbenders. Toda la parte que unbounded en el dual te aparece como un corte ahí adentro, un corte duro en el problema. Cortes de optimalidad, ahí tiene sentido, porque son todas las cosas que son finitas en el dual, ahí te agrega algo como una penalización arriba, son cortes de factibilidad, de optimalidad, perdón. Entonces te cambia el objetivo, pero el otro te da como corte duro, tú tienes que estar ahí adentro. ¿Tiene sentido? ¿Y harto sentido?
Pero cuando uno hace una reformulación como esa, en la pizarra,
¿Sí?
digamos que el gamma es convexo, ¿verdad? Y el cono es simplemente, no sé, generar cualquier cero, algo así.
¿Ya?
Pero ahí la restricción quedaría una función convexa igual a mu, ¿verdad? Pero mu es una variable y ahora entonces una función convexa igual a cero.
¿Cómo igual a cero?
La última restricción.
¿Sí?
Ahora quedó gamma menos mu igual a cero.
Sí, pero eso, no, ok, no, está bien, eso nunca está, nunca está. Lo que está es siempre esta formulación. Esta no aparece nunca, es solamente un artificio, esto es equivalente, ¿no? Es un artificio para mostrar que esto en realidad, cuando toma esta bola, es una reformulación, es un Lagrangiano aumentado de esta formulación en realidad. Pero es un artificio. Esto equivalente a esto, pero nunca aparece eso. ¿Entiendes? ¿Sí? Esto, tú lo puedes reescribir eso, ¿ya? Y cuando restringes las variables duales a una bola, entonces esto desaparece y lo relajas en este aumentado que está ahí. ¿Sí? Entonces nunca aparece. Esta igualdad no está. ¿Sí? ¿Bien? ¿Otra pregunta? ¿No?
Entonces, ¿realmente no has probado alguna relación distinta a la clásica de dos casos, BZ?
Bueno, el BZ yo lo probé. Lo probé en un paper para camino más corto, justamente. Un camino más corto con aversión a riesgo, que minimiza un conditional variable risk. ¿Sí? Entonces ya te fuiste del contexto bueno y tenéis muchos cortes, muchas restricciones en realidad, un número de escenarios, típicamente. Entonces, ahí lo que hice fue hacer el BZ, el Beanstalk, pero en las variables duales. Entonces vais desagregando los escenarios juntos y llegáis a una convergencia. Y gana el Benders. Le gana el Benders, a pesar de conservar como variable y todo eso, le gana. Y las pruebas de convergencia, o sea, de correctitud del algoritmo, era súper problem dependent, pero era como la primera vez que se había hecho algo con variable entera y hacer como decomposición con agregación de restricciones. Ahí es como una prueba súper genérica. No es como agregación, generar corte, es como cosas raras como eso. Claro, sí, apliqué lo que hicieron Eduardo y Daniel a un problema entero, pero demostré que funcionaba. Exacto.
Lo difícil es que, por ejemplo, donde funciona bien, pero cuando agregar estas cosas, prueba el BZ. Lo que preocupa de esto, que tú agregáis un montón de restricciones en el máster, la idea es que sea más fácil de resolver.
Claro.
Por
Sí.
eso lineal es muy fácil, pero si tú proyectas, reducir la dimensión del espacio.
Claro.
Pero en cónica no es claro que eso pasa.
No, po.
El cono lo estáis seccionando. O sea, es más difícil de escribir ese cono.
No hice ningún comentario al respecto. Pero estoy de acuerdo. Pero estoy de acuerdo.
Usar un ejemplo donde eso puede ayudar.
Sí. No, sí, estoy de acuerdo contigo. Ahora, te da herramientas eso. Te dice, oye, mira, si es que yo ocupo este subset, me da esta forma rara de hacer un máster. Ah, mira. En mi caso particular podría ser que el problema sea más fácil, ocupando ese subset particular. Por ejemplo. ¿Sí? ¿No más preguntas? Muy bien, muchas gracias.
Gracias, ¿no?
Nada.
Y después,
Chao, Wolfe.
¿Ah?